looping through data in Excel VBA, mastering for next, for each, and do loops. Imagine you have a worksheet with 10,000 customer records. Would you write your code like this? Range A2.value equal to use case into bracket range A2.value, or range A3.value equal to use case into bracket range A3.value. What about range A4.value equal to use case into bracket range A4.value? And continue until 10,001 row. Of course not. That will take you forever to complete. This is where one of the most powerful concepts in programming comes in, and that concept is loops. Loops allows your code to repeat a task automatically, whether it's 10 times, 100 times, or 10,000 times. Today, I'll show you how to master the 3 most important loop types in Excel VBA. They are for next, for each, and do while or do until. By the end of this lesson, you'll be writing codes as if you are a professional developer. Let's get started. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Raphael, and on this channel, we'll learn how to transform Microsoft Excel into a professional software development platform using VBA. In our previous lesson, we learned how to find the last used row and last used column. Now that we know how many records exist in our data, how do we process every one of those records automatically? The answer lies in loops. Every professional VBA application uses loops. Whether you are developing a payroll system, a school management system, an inventory system, a POS application, or staff attendance system, you use loops every single day. Let me begin by asking you this simple question. Suppose you are a teacher in a school and you need to mark the attendance for 30 students. Would you write the same instruction 30 different times? Perhaps no. You would repeat the same process for each student. Programming works the same way. A loop simply tells VBA that repeat this task until I tell you to stop. That's all a loop is. It saves you from writing the same code over and over again. Let's look at this type of loop, the for loop. The most common type of loop in VBA is the for next loop. It is used when you know how many times you want to repeat a task. Here is the basic structure. Dim I as long, next I. Since you know the number of times you want your loop to run, you would say for I is equal to 1 to 10. Let's break it down. I is called the loop counter, and it starts at 1. VBA repeats the code each time I is increased by 1. When I reaches 10, the loop ends. This is because you've told I to stop at 10 by specifically writing your code like this. For I is equal to 1 to 10. Let's run our code to see what happens. Keep an eye on the immediate window, as the output will be displayed there. For I is equal to 1 to 10. Next I, we have 1. Debug and print again. Next I, we have 2. Let me repeat it for the rest of the loop. You see that the code ends only to start again when we step into the code. Let's look at this example. Reading student names. Suppose your worksheet contains student names in column A. A2 is John, A3 is Mary, A4 is David, A5 is Sarah. Since we've already learned how to find the last row, now let's combine that with a loop. We can write our code this way. Sub student name, end sub. Then we write dim last row as long, dim I as long. Last row is equal to cells into bracket rows dot count comma 1 dot end into bracket Excel up dot row. For I is equal to 2 to the last row. Next I. Now let's run our code by stepping through. Observe what happens in the immediate window. The name John has been printed out for us. Let's continue to run our code. We also have Mary. The next is David. The next is Sarah. Since Sarah is the last row in our list, the code moves to an end, only to start over again. This type of loop automatically processes every student. If tomorrow you add 500 more students, the code still works and you don't need to write another code. Let's look at this example again. Imagine you are building Rafina payroll system and every employee salary is stored in column D. Instead of calculating each employee manually, you would write for I is equal to 2 to the last row. Cells I, 5 dot value equal to cells I, 4 dot value times 0.10%. Next I. Now, VBA can calculate tax for every employee automatically. That's the power of loops. Understanding for and next type of loop. Sometimes you don't care about row numbers. You simply want to work with every object in a collection. That's where for each type of loop comes in. For example, you could write your code this way. Dim cell as range. For each cell in range A2 to A20, next cell. In this way, instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, VBA simply says, give me one more cell after another. It is easier to read and often easier to write. What should you use for each type of loop in your application? For each type of loop is perfect when you are working with collections like cells, worksheets, workbooks, charts, shapes, files, and others. Let's look at this example. Let's say we have this procedure. Sub, number of sheets, and sub. We can write dim WS as worksheet. For each WS in worksheet, debug and print WS name, next WS. So now let's run our code. Always keep an eye on the immediate window. So we have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, sheet 5, sheet 6, sheet 7. Our code continues to end sub. Let's verify. We only have 7 worksheets opened in our workbook. That's why our code stops to run after sheet 7. In this way, we can display every worksheet name in the workbook, and you don't need to count the number of worksheets in your workbook anymore. Understanding the do loops. Now let's take a look at another type of loop. Sometimes you don't know how many times the code should repeat itself. Instead, you want it to continue while a condition is true. That's where the do loops come in. For example, dim I as long. I is equal to 1. Do while I is less than 5. I is equal to I plus 1. Then loop. Now let's run our code to see it in action, keeping an eye on the immediate window. Did you notice something different? The loop doesn't stop because it reaches a fixed number. It stops because the condition becomes false. Take a look once more. Let's take a look at the do until type of loop. This is another variation of the do loop. Instead of saying continue while something is true, we can say continue until something becomes true. For example, dim I as long. I is equal to 1. Do until I is greater than 5. I is equal to I plus 1. Then loop. Let's see our code in action once again while keeping an eye on the immediate window. both loops produce the same results. The difference is how we think about the stopping condition. Let's look at this. Imagine we are importing customer records. The worksheet grows every day. Instead of specifying a fixed number of rows, we can keep reading until we reach an empty cell. We can write our code this way. Dim I as long. I is equal to 2. Do while cells I, 1 dot value is less than or greater than nothing. I is equal to I plus 1. Then loop. With this type of code, the moment VBA finds a blank cell, the loop stops automatically. This makes your application flexible and reliable. Let's look at some common beginner mistakes that you are likely to come across. 1. Forgetting to increase the counter. Do while I is less than or equal to 10. Debug and print the loop. Since I never changes, the condition is always true. This creates an infinite loop and Excel may stop responding. Always update your counter inside a do loop. Mistake number 2. Hard coding loop limits. Avoid writing for I is equal to 2 to 100. Instead, use for I is equal to 2 to the last row. This allows your code to grow with your data. Mistake number 3. Using the wrong type of loop. Don't use a do loop when a simple for loop will do. Choose the loop that best matches the problem you are solving. Here are some professional development tips for you. Use for next when you exactly know how many times to repeat a task. Use for each next when working with collections like cells, worksheets, or workbooks. And finally, use do while or do until when the number of repetitions depends on a condition. Professional VBA developers follow these simple guidelines. Choosing the right loops make your code easier to read, easier to maintain, and often easier to execute. Let's look at this quick comparison table. For next loop, this is best used for repeating a known number of times. For each and next loop, this is good for working with collections of objects. Do while loop. This repeats a condition until it is true. Do until repeats a loop until a condition becomes true. Remember this. For loop is used to count. For each type of loop is used for collections. The do type of loop is used to satisfy a condition. That's an easier way to remember which type of loop to choose. Let's look at this live demonstration. Use a for next loop to process student records. Use for each loop to format cells in a range. Use a do while loop to import data until a blank row is read. Compare all 3 methods so you know exactly when to use each one. By the end of this demonstration, you will see how loops eliminate repetitive code and make your VBA application far more efficient. Today, you've learned what a loop is, how for each and next type of loop work, how do, while, and do until loop work, when to use each type of loop, common beginner mistakes to avoid, and professional techniques for processing large amounts of data. In our next episode, we will tackle another essential topic for every VBA developer, and that is decision making in Excel VBA. Mastering if, then, else, and select case condition. You learn how to make your VBA application think, make decisions, validate data, and respond intelligently based on a different condition. If you found this tutorial helpful, give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Rafina System Excel VBA Developer Series for more practical Excel VBA tutorials. And in the comments below, which loop do you think you use most often in your project? For next, for each next, or do while? I'd love to hear what you are building. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.